Book 1, the Book of Beginnings. Canto 3, the Yoga of the King and the Yoga of the Soul's Release. This is about the beginning of Savitri that we are reading, where Ashwapati, Savitri's father, is doing his tapasya. He is getting himself internally ready through a yogic process, to ask the Divine Mother to send her incarnation, her emanation down to earth, to break the iron law of death and to bring down to earth a greater force, which is what Sri Aurobindo calls a supramental force, the new consciousness, to change the laws of the earth. So in this canto, this is the canto of where the description of Ashwapati's own yoga and own tapasya, so that he can be ready to actually go to those planes and to have the power to even pray and call down the Divine Mother. A world's desire compelled her mortal birth, one in the front of the immemorial quest, protagonist of the mysterious play, in which the unknown pursues himself through forms and limits his eternity by the hours, and the blind void struggles to live and see. A thinker and toiler in the ideal's air, brought down to earth's dumb need her radiant power. His was a spirit that stooped from larger spheres into our province of ephemeral sight, a colonist from immortality. So here the canto starts with what compelled Savitri's mortal birth. A world's desire compelled her mortal birth. Obviously, Savitri is the incarnation or the embodiment of the Divine Mother. So, and then he goes on to say that it is a thinker and toiler who has brought down to earth's dumb need her radiant power. His was a spirit that stooped from larger spheres. Whose spirit? Ashwapati's spirit. So Savitri's father himself was not an ordinary person, he was a representative. And his was a spirit that stooped from larger spheres into our province of ephemeral sight. And he, Ashwapati, a colonist from immortality, a pointing beam on earth's uncertain roads, his birth held up a symbol and a sign. So the birth of Ashwapati himself was a symbol and a sign. His human self, like a translucent cloak, covered the all-wise who leads the unseeing world. Affiliated to cosmic space and time, and paying here God's debt to earth and man, a greater sonship was his divine right. So, a greater sonship was the divine right of Ashwapati. So in this first paragraph is introduced both the reason why Savitri has come down, will be taking a mortal birth, and also who is Ashwapati? What is the station and from which plane of consciousness has he come? His birth held up a symbol and a sign. His human self, like a translucent cloak, covered the all-wise who leads the unseeing world. So he himself, his body is like a translucent cloak covering the all-wise, means the supreme. So even Ashwapati is not an ordinary father, he's not an ordinary man. He is then a kind of an avatar. He is an avatar of the supreme divine. Affiliated to cosmic space and time, and paying here God's debt to earth and man. A greater sonship was his divine right. Although consenting to mortal ignorance, his knowledge shared the light ineffable, a strength of the original permanence, entangled in the moment and its flow. He kept the vision of the vast behind. A power was in him from the unknowable, an archivist of the symbols of the beyond, a treasurer of superhuman dreams. He bore the stamp of mighty memories and shed their grandiose ray on human life. His days were a long growth to the Supreme, a skyward being nourishing its roots on sustenance from occult spiritual founts, climbed through white rays to meet an unseen sun. His soul lived as eternity's delegate. His mind was like a fire assailing heaven. Some of you may have seen this book called Eternity's Delegate. So his soul lived as eternity's delegate on earth. His mind was like a fire assailing heaven. His will a hunter in the trails of light. An ocean impulse lifted every breath. Each action left the footprints of a god. Each moment was a beat of puissant wings. The little plot of our mortality, touched by this tenant from the heights, became a playground of the living infinite. So this little tenant, this plot of our mortality, what is this little plot of our mortality? Earth. The earth itself is a little plot of human mortality, touched by this tenant. Which tenant? Ashwapati. From the heights became a playground of the living infinite. And then here, as I said last time, this is a digression, a kind of a overall general statement that the narrator Sri Aurobindo is making. This bodily appearance is not all. And then he makes a statement for all of humanity. From Ashwapati specifically, he goes to a general statement here. This bodily appearance is not all. The form deceives. The person is a mask. Hid deep in man, celestial powers can dwell. His fragile ship conveys through the sea of years an incognito of the imperishable. A spirit that is a flame of God abides, a fiery portion of the wonderful, artist of his own beauty and delight, immortal in our mortal poverty. This sculptor of the forms of the infinite, this screened, unrecognized inhabitant, initiate of his own veiled mysteries, hides in a small dumb seed his cosmic thought. In the mute strength of the occult idea, determining predestined shape and act, passenger from life to life, from scale to scale, changing his image self from form to form. He regards the icon growing by his gaze, and in the worm foresees the coming God. So here is a wonderful description how we as human beings travel from birth to birth, from form to form. And this seed of the psychic being continues in every form and overlooks and presides over our destiny. So the seed that he speaks of here is what is the thing that abides. Initiate of his own veiled mysteries, hides in a small dumb seed his cosmic thought. In the mute strength of the occult idea, determining predestined shape and act. So what determines predestined shape and act? The psychic seed. Passenger from life to life, from scale to scale of consciousness. He regards the icon growing by his gaze, and in the worm foresees the coming God. So in the worm foresees the coming God. At last the traveller in the paths of time arrives on the frontiers of eternity. In the transient symbol of humanity draped, he feels his substance of undying self, and when he arrives at this frontier of eternity, at last, then he feels his substance of undying self, which has been draped in the transient symbol of humanity. In the transient symbol of humanity draped, he feels his substance of undying self and loses his kinship to mortality. A beam of the eternal then smites his heart. So this is a description of what is the evolutionary journey for all of us. A beam of the eternal smites his heart, his thought stretches into infinitude. All in him turns to spirit vastnesses. His soul breaks out to join the oversoul. And then his soul breaks out, the psychic being breaks out to join the oversoul, which is a reference to Jivatman. The Atman and the Jivatman unite. His thought stretches into infinitude. All in him turns to spirit vastnesses. His soul breaks out to join the oversoul. His life is oceaned by that super life. So again, the Atman and the Jivatman meet. Life is oceaned by that super life, that the fount of the life, which is the, I don't know what the Sanskrit word is, but it's the, in the planes of being, it is in the higher regions of life, where the prototype of the highest life force, prana, is situated. So his life is oceaned by that super life. He is drunk from the breasts of the mother of the worlds. A topless super nature fills his frame. So supernature fills, a topless supernature. Obviously a descent of the supreme, of the highest supernature, of that is paraprakriti, that is above what you would say from the higher consciousnesses, that comes down and fills his frame. He is drunk from the breast of the mother of the worlds. A topless supernature fills his frame. She adopts his spirit's everlasting ground as the security of her changing world and shapes the figure of her unborn mites. Immortally, she conceives herself in him. In the creature, the unveiled creatrix works. Her face is seen through his face, her eyes through his eyes. So the Supreme Being, the Supreme Mother, the creatrix of the entire universe, that which is beyond time and space, that shines through his face and sees through his eyes. He becomes a transparent instrument for her action and her force. So you remember the book The Mother, where Sri Aurobindo says that the mother then shall work through you. Her powers will enter you, and then she will be, you will see her, you will understand that it is not you who work, but it is she who is working through you. She is both the sadhak and the sadhana. This is a description of that in poetic language. So, immortally she conceives herself in him. In the creature, the unveiled creatrix works. Her face is seen through his face, her eyes through his eyes. Her being is his through a vast identity. Her being is his through a vast identity. Then is revealed in man the overt divine. What is the overt? Is the opposite of covert. So overt divine. Then is revealed in man the overt divine, divine that is right in front. A static oneness and dynamic power descend in him, the integral Godhead's seals. His soul and body take that splendid stamp. So this is what happens. You understand? When that creatrix, the Divine Mother, enters. This is the yoga which is being described that Ashwapati is undergoing. As you all know, Ashwapati is, a lot of his experiences are autobiographical in terms that Sri Aurobindo himself went through all this. That's why he could write the book, The Mother. And Ashwapati is very closely aligned with Sri Aurobindo's own life in terms of his spiritual sadhana. So, his soul and body take that splendid stamp. Now, there's again a digression, a kind of interlude, wonderful epic structure, the way that Sri Aurobindo composes Savitri. So now the narrative ends here, and then again a long dimmed preparation is man's life. Then now he goes again into a generalization. He is explaining this in the same way that this happens to that avatar or that instrument prepared who comes down and brings this in his own life. The same way a long dim preparation is man's life. So every man can reach this. That's what he's trying to say. A long dim preparation is man's life, a circle of toil and hope and war and peace, tracked out by life on matter's obscure ground. So this is a wonderful description of ourselves, of where we are. You can recognize your own self here and all of humanity and the world. A long dim preparation is man's life, a circle of toil and hope and war and peace, tracked out by life on matter's obscure ground. In his climb to a peak no feet have ever trod, he seeks through a penumbra shot with flame, a veiled reality half known, ever missed, a search for something or someone never found, call of an ideal never made real here, an endless spiral of ascent and fall. So this is certainly what we go through. We are in search of something that we can't catch, and this is like an endless spiral of ascent and fall. But it is a spiral, it's not a circle. So there is a movement, a progress. Please note the word spiral here, not circle. So it's a circle of toil and hope and war and peace, but it is an endless spiral of ascent and fall, until at last is reached the giant point through which His glory shines, for whom we were made. And we break into the infinity of God. So until the time, the giant point through which His glory, whose glory? Man's glory, shines, for whom we were made. Whom were we made for? Through which His glory shines, for whom we were made. And we break into the infinity of God. Across our nature's borderline, we escape. And then what happens to us? Humanity, or human beings, or anybody doing yoga? Across our nature's borderline, we escape into supernature's arc of living light. So we are even prepared through birth and birth and birth to even come to the point of wanting to do yoga. Even the idea that one is chosen to do kind of tapasya, kind of practice of spiritual practice is certainly not everybody is interested in doing it. So every soul is on a different path and at a different journey and a different road, and nobody's at the same point, but each of us are at different points. And those that have become conscious enough to realize the purpose of one's life then begin to take up an accelerated evolution and progress, which is called yoga. So until at last is reached the giant point through which His glory shines, for whom we were made, and we break into the infinity of God. Across our nature's borderline we escape into supernature's arc of living light. This now was witnessed in that son of force. Now it comes back to the narrative. This now is what was witnessed in Ashwapati, the son of force. Called him the son of force. This now. That means what he's saying is Ashwapati, the human Ashwapati, has come to that point in his own evolutionary journey of life through birth and birth, endlessly, to that point where this is happening to him. That the supernature, he has escaped from the lower nature into the supernature's arc of living light. This now was witnessed in that son of force. In him that high transition laid its base, original and supernal immanence, of which all nature's process is the art. The cosmic worker set his secret hand to turn this frail mud engine to heaven use. Even Ashwapati's human self is made of mud. Nobody can escape the law of inconscience and the law of mortality unless he actually accelerates his own evolution and does some form of yoga. The cosmic worker with a capital W, set his secret hand to turn this frail mud engine to heaven use. A presence wrought behind the ambiguous screen. Presence with a capital P. Wrought behind the ambiguous screen, it beat his soul to bear a titan's weight, refining half-hewn blocks of natural strength. It built his soul into a statued God. So as again, this presence that is behind the ambiguous screen is the presence, the psychic presence, the divine presence that is behind our human outer exterior, beats us, meaning gives us circumstances so that we are refining half-hewn blocks of natural strength. It built his soul, whose soul? Ashwapati's soul, into a statued God. And he's beat his soil to bear a titan's weight. Unless one goes through pain and suffering and trial and tribulations, unless one goes through fire, one cannot bear the titan's weight. One cannot bear the supreme descent. One has to be hewed. One's substance has to be changed. So this is what is happening to Ashwapati. A presence wrought behind the ambiguous screen. It beat his soil to bear a titan's weight, refining half-hewn blocks of natural strength. It built his soul into a statued God. The craftsman of the magic stuff of self, who labors at his high and difficult plan in the wide workshop of the wonderful world, modeled in inward time his rhythmic parts. So this craftsman of the magic stuff of self, who is the craftsman here? Who labors at his high and difficult plan in the wide workshop of the wonderful world, modeled in inward time his rhythmic parts. Then came the abrupt, transcendent miracle, the masked, immaculate grandeur could outline. At travail in the occult womb of life, his dreamed magnificence of things to be, a crown of the architecture of the worlds, a mystery of married earth and heaven, annexed divinity to the mortal scheme. A seer was born, a shining guest of time. For him, mind's limiting firmament ceased above. In the griffin forefront of the night and day, a gap was rent in the all-concealing vault. The conscious ends of being went rolling back. The landmarks of the little person fell. The island ego joined its continent. So this is a beautiful description of Ashwapati's yoga and how the island ego joined its continent. The ego disappeared and it became the universal cosmic self. The universal cosmic consciousness entered into Ashwapati. So this is the way that the inner craftsman, hewed and worked from within to bring Ashwapati to this ground. A seer was born, a shining guest of time. A seer was born in Ashwapati, a shining guest of time. For him, mind's limiting firmament ceased above. In the griffin forefront of the night and day, a gap was rent in the all-concealing vault. The conscious ends of being went rolling back. The landmarks of the little person fell. The island ego joined its continent. So here is a wonderful description of what happens to Ashwapati because of his tapasya and his yoga, the divine presence descends into him, joins the island ego, which is broken away, the I that thinks that it's separate from the divine, it joins it back into the continent of the divine. So this kind of cosmic realization, this sense of oneness, these are all the great spiritual experiences that, are talked about in the Vedas and the Upanishads, which in English verse, in iambic pentameter, Sri Aurobindo here describes in simple 2 lines. So, the landmarks of the little person fell. The island ego joined its continent. Overpast was this world of rigid limiting forms. Now this is a description of what happens when our ego, when human ego, anybody's ego, not just Ashwapati's, when our island ego joins the continent of the vast Jivatman of the over-self, when one is in complete union with the highest consciousness, then what happens to one? So when one loses the sense of the separate ego, then this is the description. So overpast was this world of rigid limiting forms. Life's barriers opened into the unknown. Abolished were conceptions, covenants, and striking off subjection's rigorous clause. Annulled the soul's treaty with nature's nescience. So this is what happens. All the grey inhibitions were torn off and broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. Note the word. Intellect's hard and lustrous lid. The intellect has a luster to it. It has a shining substance to it. But it is hard and it doesn't allow the larger knowledge, the wisdom, the omniscience, the omnipresence to filter in. So annulled and broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. So the intellect itself was broken. Truth unpartitioned found immense sky room. So truth unpartitioned found immense sky room in Ashwapati. An Empyrean vision saw and knew. The bounded mind became a boundless light. And this is what happens when the intellect is overpassed and it becomes part of this, the higher regions of the mind, which is the overmind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind. So all these consciousnesses come into the hard intellectual. The intellect actually stops them to come into our own brain and into our own mind. So when the intellect has been broken, first you have to develop an intellect. You can't break it unless you have an intellect. Now, of course, Ashwapati is at a stage, very high stage of his own evolution, where his intellect is fully developed. Then you have to give it up. Ego is the helper, ego is the bar. To become an individual, one must have an ego. Otherwise, there's no sense of individuality. But when the individuality is formed fully, the character is formed fully, then the ego has to be given up. So, in the same way, the intellect has to open itself to the higher regions of the higher mind, consciousness and light that enter the intellect, enter the mind, and come into the being. So, this is what is happening to Ashwapati here. So, an Empyrean vision saw and knew. The bounded mind became a boundless light. The finite self mated with infinity. His march now soared into an eagle's flight out of apprenticeship to ignorance. So before he was an apprentice to ignorance, and now his mind soared above. Wisdom upraised him to her master craft and made him an arch-mason of the soul, a builder of the immortal secret house, an aspirant to supernal timelessness. Freedom and empire called to him from on high. Above mind's twilight and life's star-led night, there gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. So this is the description of what happens to all of us when the ego is joins the continent, or becomes, the ego of course is given up or becomes sublimated, and we become part of the cosmic consciousness. So that to be able to have that cosmic consciousness, the ego has to be sublimated. And then, as so he grew into his larger self. The next paragraph talks about as so he grew. Who grew? Ashwapati grew into his larger self. So this is a description of Ashwapati's own yoga, which is a biographical, thing of Sri Aurobindo's own path which he took. So, above mind's twilight and life's star-led night, there gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. As so he grew into his larger self, humanity framed his movements less and less. Just look at the poetry of this. Beautiful poetry. It's all in meter. It's stress, unstressed, stress, iambic, pentameter. 5 stresses, and there's a rhythm in this, So if you listen just to the poetry itself, it'll take you deep into the meaning. Don't try and understand the words. Let this flow and let the images form into your mind. So, as so he grew into his larger self, humanity framed his movements less and less. A greater being saw a greater world. A fearless will for knowledge dared to erase the lines of safety. Reason draws that bar mind saw. Souls dive into the infinite. So a fearless will for knowledge dared to erase the lines of safety. So reason draws those lines of safety that does not allow the mind to soar or the soul to dive into the infinite. Because unless you're ready, if the reason wasn't there, you could go into some sort of a delusional thing. So there are many things in our own being that are there to safeguard us so that we go to the next stage. When you go climb higher, we actually do it in a safe and careful way. So here it's a wonderful description. Also, you can see the limitation of reason. Reason is the helper. Reason is the bar. So at one point, reason becomes an impediment for the further progress of the soul into its divinity, when it's going to its full divinization. But until then, reason is the helper, because it helps us to become, reasonable beings and not go into some delusional sort of realms or fancies. So, a fearless will for knowledge dared to erase the lines of safety reason draws, that bar mind saw, souls dive into the infinite. Even his first steps broke our small earth bounds, and loitered in a vaster, freer air. In hand sustained by a transfiguring might, he caught up lightly like a giant's bow, left slumbering in a sealed and secret cave the powers that sleep unused in man within. He made of miracle a normal act, and turned to a common part of divine works, magnificently natural at this height, efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts, pursued in a royalty of mighty ease, aims too sublime for nature's daily will, the gifts of the Spirit crowding came to him. Look at the wonderful line. The gifts of the Spirit crowding came to you. You can just imagine. They were actually flowing into him. The gifts of the Spirit crowding came to him. They were his life's pattern and his privilege. Pure perception lent its lucent joy. Its intimate vision waited not to think. It enveloped all nature in a single glance. So pure perception lent its lucent joy. Its intimate vision waited not to think. The thought process itself became silent. It enveloped all nature in a single glance. It looked into the very self of things. Deceived no more by form, he saw the soul. In beings, it knew what lurked to them unknown. It seized the idea in mind, the wish in the heart. So therefore you see this. When this starts happening, when you see great sages, they can read other people's thoughts. They can know what is going on in them before they themselves know it. This is the kind of unity of perception, identity that takes place when the ego island joins its continent, because then you become one with all beings. All beings meaning sentient being, animals, all beings, not just human beings. So you have that great sense of sympathy and a sense of understanding, and you know without words and without thought what the other is thinking. So this is, you can see when a lot of people went, those who've had the experience of being in front of such people, who've met the mother or Sri Aurobindo or any great sage, you will have these experiences. They can know what is in your mind because they are identified with everything. If they wish to know something, they can know it. So, deceived no more by form, he saw the soul. In beings it knew what lurked to them unknown. It seized the idea in mind, the wish in the heart. It plucked out from grey folds of secrecy the motives which from their own sight men hide. So this consciousness, the gifts of the Spirit, this allowed, once it comes into oneself, as it came into Ashwapati, then these are the ways that you can find out even what you yourself trying to hide from yourself, or what the other tries to hide from himself. So even what human beings don't know themselves, this consciousness can pick up. That is the height and the intensity and the depth of this consciousness. So it plucked out from grey folds of secrecy the motives which from their own sight men hide. He felt the beating life in other men. And now you see this beautiful description. So Ashwapati, once this consciousness had descended in him, then he felt the beating life in other men invade him with their happiness and their grief. So then you also become one with the grief and happiness of all men, of those who come in touch with you. Yes, so you have to be very strong to bear that. It's not easy to bear all this knowledge. So he felt the beating life in other men invade him with their happiness and their grief, their love, their anger, their unspoken hopes entered in currents or in pouring waves into the immobile ocean of his calm. Look at the beautiful way it's described. Their love, their anger, their unspoken hopes entered in currents or in pouring waves into the immobile ocean of his calm. He heard the inspired sound of his own thoughts, re-echoed in the vault of other minds. The world's thought streams travelled into his ken. His inner self grew near to others' selves and bore a kinship's weight, a common tie, yet stood untouched, king of itself alone. So though he was one with all, because of his high and deep stature, he could stand detached from it. It didn't submerge him. Yet he was king of himself and bore a kinship's weight, a common tie, yet stood untouched, king of itself alone. A magical accord quickened and attuned to ethereal symphonies the old earthy strings. It raised the servitors of mind and life to be happy partners in the soul's response. Tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords. So this is all then takes place. A magical accord quickened and attuned to ethereal symphonies, the old earthy strings. It raised the servitors of mind and life. What mind and life both became happy partners in the soul's response. They no longer obeyed the lower nature's calls or the inconscious or the egoistic responses. They became part of the soul's response. Tissue and nerve, even the physical tissue and nerve, were turned to sensitive chords, records of luster and ecstasy. It made the body's means, the spirit's acolytes. A heavenlier function with a finer mode, lit with its grace, man's outward earthliness. So a heavenlier function with a finer mode, lit with its grace, man's outward earthliness. So even the physical appearance changed. The soul's experience of its deeper sheaths no more slept drugged by matter's dominance. In the dead wall, closing us from wider self into a secrecy of apparent sleep, the mystic tract beyond our waking thoughts, a door parted, built in by matter's force, releasing things unseized by earthly sense. A world unseen, unknown by outward mind, appeared in the silent spaces of the soul. He sat in secret chambers looking out into the luminous countries of the unborn, where all things dreamed by the mind are seen and true, and all that the life longs for is drawn close. He saw the perfect in their starry homes, wearing the glory of a deathless form. Lain in the arms of the eternal space, wrapped in the heartbeats of God ecstasy, he lived in the mystic space where thought is born and will is nursed by an ethereal power, and fed on the white milk of the eternal strengths till it grows into the likeness of a god. In the witness's occult rooms, with mind-built walls, on hidden interiors, lurking passages, opened the windows of the inner sight. He owned the house of undivided time. This is a reference to Ashwapati having the power and the faculty of Trikala Drishti. Undivided time is the past, present, and the future together. He owned the house of undivided time. Lifting the heavy curtain of this flesh, he stood upon a threshold serpent watched, and peered into the gleaming endless corridors. So lifting the heavy curtain of the flesh, he stood upon a threshold serpent watched, and peered into gleaming endless corridors, silent and listening in the silent heart for the coming of the new and the unknown. He gazed across the empty stillnesses and heard the footsteps of the undreamed idea in the far avenues of the beyond. He heard the secret voice, the word that knows, and saw the secret face that is our own. The inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. Strange powers and influences touched his life. A vision came of higher realms than ours, a consciousness of brighter fields and skies, of beings less circumscribed than brief-lived men, and subtler bodies than these passing frames. Objects too fine for our material grasp, acts vibrant with a superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscient force, and joys that never flowed through mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than earth's and happier lives. So once Ashwapati is able to move the heavy curtain of the flesh, the material, physical mind, and all that drags one into the outer life. Once he's able to get out of that and go into his inner self, inner being, and then rise above, this is what he sees. He sees a whole new world. Inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. A vision came of higher realms than ours, and so on, subtler bodies than these passing frames. Objects too fine, acts vibrant with a superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscient force, and joys that never float to mortal, and so on. So lovelier scenes and earths and happier lives. A consciousness of beauty and of bliss. A knowledge which became what it perceived. What is this knowledge that becomes what it perceives? It's knowledge by identity. So you know because you become that. And that is the method of knowing in the supermind. So a consciousness of beauty and of bliss, a knowledge which became what it perceived, replaced the separated sense and heart, and drew all nature into its embrace. So this knowledge which became what it perceived, it replaced the sense and the heart, which are both separated. Why? By the ego. And drew all nature into its embrace. Became one with nature. The mind leaned out to meet the hidden worlds. Air glowed and teemed with marvelous shapes and hues. In the nostrils quivered celestial fragrances. On the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. So this is the experience of Ashwapati which is being described here by the narrator. The mind leaned out to meet the hidden worlds. Air glowed and teemed with marvelous shapes and hues. In the nostrils quivered celestial fragrances. On the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. A channel of universal harmony. Hearing was a stream of magic audience. Now all these inner faculties opened up in Ashwapati. What were they? One was Trikala Drishti. Second was the nectar. He could taste Amrit, what we call the nectar of the gods on his tongue. He could see, he could smell celestial fragrances. And he came into this inner world and saw these wonderful new sights, which is actually the higher worlds. Now, a channel of universal harmony, hearing, and then also his hearing. You remember the mother said that there are these new faculties that are being opened up in man and can be opened. Clairaudience, clairvoyance, and many others. So here, hearing was a stream of magic audience. So his hearing also, he could hear from far. A bed for occult sounds earth cannot hear. So he could hear sounds that earth cannot hear, which are unheard by human ears. Out of a covered tract of slumber self, the voice came of a truth submerged, unknown that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces, only mid an omniscient silence heard, held by intuitive heart and secret sense. So also he could hear this voice, that voice that was of a truth submerged. It means that it came from the cosmic surfaces. And he could hear this in the omniscient silence of his mind, held by intuitive heart and secret sense. So this hearing was not only of an inner occult hearing, but of the cosmic hearing. It caught the burden of secrecies, sealed and dumb. It voiced the unfulfilled demand of earth and the song of promise of unrealized heaven, and all that hides in an omnipotent sleep. In the unceasing drama carried by time, on its long listening flood that bears the worlds, insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal, a laughter of sleepless pleasure foamed and spumed, and murmurings of desire that cannot die. A cry came of the world's delight to be. So this is all the things that Ashwapati is hearing. A cry came of the world's delight to be, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live, recall of the soul's adventure into space, a traveler through the magic centuries, and being's labor in matter's universe, its search for the mystic meaning of its birth, and joy of high spiritual response, its throb of satisfaction and content, in all the sweetness of the gifts of life, its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture's poignant beat of sudden bliss, the sob of its passion and unending pain. So not only does he hear that which is outside in the cosmic universe, that is unheard by human ears, and the inner worlds and the outer worlds, but he also hears the unspoken yearning and aspiration of earth and of all of nature, which is asking for release. He feels everything, hears everything. All his faculties are opened. Those faculties that if they opened in us too early, we would not be able to bear this kind of experience, because we are not strong enough to hear all this. So you can see all that Ashwapati is able to know. Wonderful autobiographical, of course, account of Sri Aurobindo's own siddhis. So, the sob of its passion, unending pain. The murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds. Notice, the murmur and whisper of the unheard sound. What is unheard sounds called in Hindi? Anahat Brahma. That which cannot be heard. Yes, by the physical ear. But it can be heard by the inner ear once it opens. The murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds which crowd around our hearts but find no window to enter, swelled into a canticle. Canticle, you know what that means? Yeah, huge musical hymn. So, to enter swelled into a canticle of all that suffers to be still unknown, and all that labors vainly to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be, inaudible to our deaf mortal ears. All of this is inaudible to what? To our deaf mortal ears, which is what Sri Aurobindo is listening to in the figure of Ashwapati. And all that labors vainly to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be, inaudible to our deaf mortal ears, the wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant, to which life strives to fit our rhyme beats here. So, which are these wide world rhythms, they wove their stupendous chant, which was heard by Ashwapati, to which life strives to fit our rhyme beats here, melting our limits in the illimitable, tuning the finite to infinity. A low muttering rose from the subconscious caves. Now, he can also not only hear the subliminal, but he can also hear the subconscious caves. That means that which is in the darkest depths of matter's night and ignorance. So, a low muttering rose from the subconscious caves, the stammer of the primal ignorance, answer to that inarticulate questioning. There stooped with lightning neck and thunder's wings, radiant hymn to the inexpressible, and the anthem of the superconscious light. So he heard the muttering that rose from the subconscious caves as an answer to that inarticulate questioning, and from there stooped with lightning neck and thunder's wings, a radiant hymn to the inexpressible, and the anthem of the superconscious light. So even the yearning of the subconscious, the darkness, the ignorance, towards the light, that yearning, that which is inaudible, which we don't even perceive, we don't even know that there is such a yearning, Ashwapati was able to perceive and hear. Right? All was revealed there, none can here express. So what was revealed? All was revealed in this, that none can here on this mortal level express. Vision and dream were fables spoken by truth, or symbols more veridical than fact, or were truths enforced by supernatural seals. Immortal eyes approached and looked in his. So, a radiant hymn to the inexpressible and the anthem of the superconscious light. And in that, all was revealed. And those truths that were not visible or could not be expressed here were expressed through vision and dreams, which were more true than the facts here on earth, or were truths enforced by supernatural seals. Immortal eyes approached and looked in his, and beings of many kingdoms neared and spoke. So he could see the immortal eyes, those undying eyes of the Supreme that looked into his, and the beings of many kingdoms and spheres looked in his. neared and spoke to him, the ever-living, whom we name as dead. And who were these beings that came from beyond and neared and spoke to him? Those were the ever-living, immortal beings that we think are dead. The ever-living, whom we name as dead, could leave their glory beyond death and birth to utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase. The kings of evil and the kings of good. So both beings, the kings of evil and the kings of good, appellants at the reason's judgment seat. Who were the kings of evil and the kings of good? They were appellants at the reason's judgment seat, proclaimed the gospel of their opposites, and all believed themselves spokesmen of God. So these kings of evil and kings of good all believed themselves spokesmen of God, the gods of light and the titans of the dark. So the gods of light and the titans of the dark battled for his soul as for a costly prize. In every hour loosed from the quiver of time, there rose a song of new discovery. In every hour loosed from the quiver of time, there rose a song of new discovery, a bow twang's hum of young experiment. Each day was a spiritual romance, as if he was born into a bright new world. Adventure leaped an unexpected friend, and danger brought a keen sweet tang of joy. Each happening was a deep experience. There were high encounters, epic colloquies, and counsels came couched in celestial speech, and honeyed pleadings breathed from occult lips to help the heart to yield to rapture's call. And sweet temptations stole from beauty's realms, and sudden ecstasies from a world of bliss. It was a region of wonder and delight. All now his bright clairaudience could receive, a contract thrilled of mighty unknown things. All now his bright clairaudience could receive. Now what does that mean? All now his bright clairaudience? Clairaudience is hearing. Could receive. They could also hear him. So what we say, we talk about clairvoyance, clairaudience, and what is the other thing? There was one more. When you can see from afar. Clairvoyance is that's seeing from afar. Clairaudience is hearing from afar. And when you can sense from afar, I don't know what that, there's a word for that also. All now his bright clairaudience could receive, a contact thrilled of mighty unknown things, awakened to new unearthly closenesses. The touch replied to subtle infinities, and with a silver cry of opening gates, sight's lightnings leaped into the invisible. Ever his consciousness and vision grew. They took an ampler sweep, a loftier flight. He passed the border marked for matter's rule, and passed the zone where thought replaces life. So as Ashwapati's consciousness and vision grew, he passed the border marked for matter's rule, passed beyond the border of matter, and he passed beyond the zone where thought replaces life. Out of this world of signs, suddenly he came into a silent self where world was not, and looked beyond into a nameless vast. These symbol figures lost their right to live. All tokens dropped, our sense can recognize. There the heart beat no more at body's touch. So when Ashwapati passed in beyond matter, beyond life, beyond thought, the world of mind, he entered into this nameless vast, which is called into a silent self, where world was not, almost like a shunyam. And in this region of consciousness, there was no signs, there were no senses, there was no heart that beat at body's touch. All tokens dropped, our sense can recognize. So obviously the senses there were completely silent, and there was no use for them. There the eyes gazed no more. So all the 7 senses or 12 senses were not of any value. There the eyes gazed no more on beauty's shape in rare and lucent intervals of hush. Into a signless region he could soar, packed with the deep contents of formlessness. So even formlessness has a lot of content. Formlessness does not mean vacancy in the sense of nothing. So listen to the words. Into a signless region he could soar, packed with the deep contents of formlessness, where world was into a single being wrapped. So in this place, world was into a single being wrapped, and all was known by the light of identity. And spirit was its own self-evidence, and spirit too was known only by itself and not through the senses. So, and all was known by the light of identity, and spirit was its own self-evidence. The Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes, and saw all things and creatures as itself, and knew all thought and word as its own voice. So the Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes. Who were the human eyes that it looked out through? Ashwapati's eyes. The Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes and saw all things and creatures as itself, complete self-identity. Through identity he was able to know and see. So the Supreme saw all things and creatures through Ashwapati's eyes as itself. So complete identification of Ashwapati with everything, every creature, the world and outside the world. So everything. The Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes and saw all things and creatures as itself, and knew all thought and word as its own voice. There, unity is too close for search and clasp, and love is a yearning of the one for the one. And there, in this place, unity is too close for search and clasp, and love is an identity or a yearning of the one for the one. And beauty is a sweet difference of the same, and oneness is the soul of multitude. So oneness and multitude, all the contraries, there are one. They are merged into one thing. It's only our mind that divides and creates contradictions and divisions and sees oneness and multitude or multitudinousness as separate and creates these divisions. And this consciousness and this plane, everything is seen in one consciousness, and this division is no longer there. And love is a yearning of the one for the one, and beauty is a sweet difference of the same, and oneness is the soul of multitude. There all the truths unite in a single truth. Even all the different truths unite in a single truth. So you see the kind of region and the experience that Ashwapati is having. After such a stupendous experience, you can see that it changes the way you look and you perceive and you relate when you come down into the world consciousness again. So there all the truths unite in a single truth, and all ideas rejoin reality. There, knowing herself by her own termless self, wisdom supernal, wordless absolute, sat uncompanioned in the eternal calm, all-seeing, motionless, sovereign and alone. There, knowledge needs not words to embody idea. So as we said, there were no requirement of the senses. No need for the voice, no need for words, no needs for sight, no need for sound. So there, knowledge needs not words to embody idea. Idea, please note the capital I, seeking a house in boundlessness, weary of its homeless immortality, asks not in thought's carved, brilliant cell to rest, whose single windows clipped outlook on things sees only a little arc of God's vast sky. So there, knowledge needs not words to embody idea. Idea itself which seeks a house in boundlessness, and it becomes weary of its homeless immortality, and therefore asks not in thought's carved brilliant cell to rest. So idea is much bigger than thought, which is more a function of the brain. Therefore, thought's carved brilliant cell to rest. The idea is far larger than the thought of the idea that is encapsulated or enters into the brain of the cell, the brain of the mind of the cells, you can say. So here idea, it seeks its own house in boundlessness and asks not in thought's carved brilliant cell to rest, whose single windows, clipped outlook on things, sees only a little arc of God's vast sky. The boundless with the boundless there consorts. So there, the boundless with the boundless there consorts. While there, one can be wider than the world. While there, one is one's own infinity. Now again, a reference to Ashwapati. His center, whose center? Ashwapati's center. His center was no more in earthly mind. A power of seeing silence filled his limbs. Please note where this thing occurs. A power of seeing silence filled his limbs. Because his center was no more in earthly mind, a power of seeing silence filled his limbs. Caught by a voiceless, white epiphany into a vision that surpasses forms, into a living that surpasses life, he neared the still consciousness, sustaining all. The voice that only by speech can move the mind became a silent knowledge in the soul. The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. So it did not require the voice or action to have its full strength and omnipotence. The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. A leisure in the labor of the world, a pause in the joy and anguish of the search, restored the stress of nature to God's calm. A vast unanimity ended life's debate, the war of thoughts that fathers the universe. The clash of forces struggling to prevail in the tremendous shock that lights a star as in the building of a grain of dust, the grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, ploughed by the seeking of the world's desire, the long regurgitations of time's flood, the torment edging, the dire force of lust that wakes kinetic in earth's dullard slime and carves a personality out of mud, the sorrow by which nature's hunger is fed, the estrus which creates with fire of pain, the fate that punishes virtue with defeat, the tragedy that destroys long happiness, the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods, seized in a truth which lives in its own light. So the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods, seized in a truth which lives in its own light, his soul stood free, a witness and a king. So obviously, his soul stood free. In the end, this one line shows you the realization, the mukti that Ashwapati got. After this, that's why this canto is called the yoga of the king, the yoga of the soul's release. And here it goes, his soul stood free, a witness and a king. So this is the experience that Ashwapati had, to completely free himself from everything and yet be part of everything. And it is with this obviously is autobiographical, because Sri Aurobindo had this experience and this was part of his own yoga that he has written out in Savitri. His soul stood free, a witness and a king, absorbed no more in the moment-ridden flux, where mind incessantly drifts as on a raft, hurried from phenomenon to phenomenon. He abode at rest in indivisible time. So one of the fruits of this realization that happens to Ashwapati is that he lives in indivisible time. For him, there is no past, present, and future. Time itself is one continuum. So, as if a story long written but acted now, in his present he held his future and his past, felt in the seconds the uncounted years, and saw the hours like dots upon a page. An aspect of the unknown reality altered the meaning of the cosmic scene. This huge material universe became a small result of a stupendous force. Overtaking the moment, the eternal ray illumined that which never yet was made. Thought lay down in a mighty voicelessness. The toiling thinker widened and grew still. Wisdom transcendent touched his quivering heart. His soul could sail beyond thought's luminous bar. Mind screened no more the shoreless infinite. Across a void retreating sky, he glimpsed through a last glimmer and drift of vanishing stars the superconscient realms of motionless peace, where judgment ceases and the word is mute, and the unconceived lies pathless and alone. There came not form nor any mounting voice. There only were silence and the absolute. Out of that stillness, mind new-born arose and woke to truths once inexpressible, and forms appeared dumbly significant, a seeing thought, a self-revealing voice. He knew the source from which his spirit came. Movement was married to the immobile vast. He plunged his roots into the infinite. He based his life upon eternity. Very supreme experience that Ashwapati had. And then, of course, the narrator goes on and says, however, these states of great and high elevated consciousness and spiritual experiences last a while and then you have to go back. So only a while at first, these heavenlier states, these large, wide, poised upliftings could endure, because the human nature is so earthy bound, so earthly, made of mud and inconscient, that even if one has these highest experiences, yet the pull of earth, the gravitation of the unconscious and the unconscious pulls one down. So one has to keep doing this till entire stuff changes. So only a while at first these heavenlier states, these large, wide poised upliftings could endure. The high and luminous tension breaks too soon. So if one had to continue in that elevated state of consciousness, the human being would break. It means the high and luminous tension breaks too soon. The body's stone stillness and the life's hushed trance. The breathless might and the calm of silent mind. Or slowly they fail as sets a golden day. So these experiences then recede, they go back, they recede into the inner consciousness, and one comes down into a lower state, because it takes time for the body be able to bear this high experience all the time. So same happened with Ashwapati. The high and luminous tension breaks too soon. The body's stone stillness and the life's hushed trance, the breathless might and calm of silent mind. Or slowly they fail as sets a golden day. The restless nether members tire of peace, a nostalgia of old little works and joys, a need to call back small, familiar selves, to tread the accustomed and inferior way. So these nether members, these lower members, the inconscient and subconscious members, tire too soon of peace and want to bring back the old familiar works and joys and selves and tread the old familiar inferior way. The need to rest in a natural pose of fall. As a child who learned to walk can walk not long. Replace the Titan will forever to climb. On the heart's altar dim the sacred fire. So as a child who learned to walk and walk not long, similarly replace the Titan will forever to climb. On the heart's altar dim the sacred fire. An old pull of subconscious chords renews. It draws the unwilling spirit from the heights, or a dull gravitation drags us down to the blind driven inertia of our base. This is a common state that happens to all spiritual aspirants. We all have high experiences, but we cannot continue and sustain that because of this reason. And the same state and the same experience, Ashwapati, even though he was a very great sage and avatar and Maharishi, even Sri Aurobindo had to go through it over and over again. As a child who learns to walk and walk not long, replace the Titan will forever to climb, on the heart's altar dim the sacred fire. An old pull of subconscious chords renews. It draws the unwilling spirit from the heights, or a dull gravitation drags us down to the blind driven inertia of our base. This too the supreme diplomat can use. He makes our fall a means for greater rise. For into ignorant nature's gusty field, into the half-ordered chaos of mortal life, the formless power, the self of eternal light, follow in the shadow of the Spirit's descent. The twin duality, forever one, chooses its home mid the tumults of the sense. He comes unseen into our darker parts, and, curtained by the darkness, does his work. So, the twin duality, forever one, chooses its home mid the tumults of the sense. And even through our fall, even when we have fallen, in the darkness, curtained by the darkness, he does his work. So he makes our fall a means for greater rise. A subtle and all-knowing guest and guide, till they too feel the need and will to change. So this, he keeps doing his inner work. The work continues on our inner planes, into subconscious and unconscious parts, until he says, those parts also learn to obey a higher law and feel the need and will to change. So this is a thing. You come down, but you feel that you're in the ordinary consciousness. However, the work continues of transformation. If there is a sustained will and aspiration in the sadhak. If there isn't, then of course it stops. So this is obviously, when the narrator is saying this, he's referring to Ashwapati, who is doing sapasya, and Sri Aurobindo, who is doing yoga. So this is for the person who is doing yoga, not for ordinary mortals who are not doing anything. Please note, there is a difference. Till they too feel the need and will to change. All here must learn to obey a higher. All here in the earthly world, all unconscious, inconscient, subliminal, subconscious, conscious, every part of ourselves must feel the need and will to change. And all here must learn to obey a higher law. Our body's cells must hold the immortal's flame, else would the spirit reach alone its source, leaving a half-saved world to its dubious fate. Else, the spirit alone would reach its source, leaving a half-dubious world to its dubious fate. Half-saved world to its dubious fate. Nature would ever labor unredeemed. There would be no redemption for nature if the lower parts could not and would not change. So obviously the transformation can happen in all the parts of nature, not only the higher spiritual and psychic parts, but even the body, the cells of the body, the vital being, the life force, the cells, the subconscious parts, the subliminal parts, every part can change, leaving a half-saved world to its dubious fate. Nature would ever labor unredeemed. And if that was to happen, then nature would ever labor unredeemed. Our earth would ever spin unhelped in space. However, that is not so. And this immense creation's purpose fail. If all the members of every part were not able to change, then our earth would ever spin unhelped in space, and this immense creation's purpose fail, till at last the frustrate universe sank undone. Even his godlike strength to to rise must fall. Very important. Even his godlike strength to rise must fall. His greater consciousness withdrew behind. So here again, Ashwapati's greater consciousness, which he had just realized, withdrew behind. His dim and eclipsed, his human outside strove to feel again the old sublimities. Bring the high saving touch, the ethereal flame, call back to its dire need the divine force. Always the power poured back like sudden rain. So because of the fact that he comes back into his ordinary consciousness and feels the need again to call the divine force. And in this calling of the divine force, his lower members change. And when he starts calling for the divine force comes back like sudden rain. So dim and eclipsed, his human outside strove to feel again the old sublimities. Bring the high saving touch, the ethereal flame, call back to its dire need the divine force. Then the great lines, always the power poured back like sudden rain, or slowly in his breast a presence grew. It clambered back to some remembered height, or soared above the peak from which it fell. Each time he rose there was a larger poise, a dwelling on a higher spirit plane. The light remained in him a longer space. In this oscillation between earth and heaven, in this ineffable communion's climb, there grew in him, as grows a waxing moon, the glory of the integer of his soul, a union of the real with the unique, a gaze of the alone from every face, the presence of the eternal in the hours, widening the mortal mind's half look on things, bridging the gap between man's force and fate, made whole the fragment being we are here. At last was won a firm spiritual poise. So with this going up and down in consciousness, up and down the ladder, soon after a while, Ashwapati won a firm spiritual poise. It's not that you continually do that eternally. There are poises that you go to. There are establishments. There are certain things that get established and certain siddhis, and those are called siddhis. What is called a siddhi? Something that is permanently there, that does not waver, does not go back and forth. Everything else is, you have spiritual experiences, but unless you have a siddhi, you cannot sustain it. So this is what then he says here, the narrator, made whole the fragment being we are here. At last was won a firm spiritual poise, a constant lodging in the eternal's realm. Now this is a siddhi. A safety in the silence and the ray. A settlement in the immutable. His heights of being lived in the still self. His mind could rest on a supernal ground and look down on the magic and the play where the God-child lies on the lap of night and dawn. And the everlasting puts on time's disguise. To the still heights and to the troubled depths, his equal spirit gave its vast ascent, a poised serenity of tranquil strength, a wide, unshaken look on time's unrest. Wonderful line here. A wide, unshaken look on time's unrest. So that was the state of consciousness that Ashwapati had established in himself, that he could look at everything, all of events, all the world, every single thing with that vast, unshaken look on time's unrest. Time's unrest is, of course, what is going on outside in the world and inside. So his equal spirit gave its vast ascent, a poised serenity of tranquil strength, a wide, unshaken look on time's unrest, faced all experience with unaltered peace, whatever the experience, indifferent to the sorrow and delight, untempted by the marvel and the call, immobile it beheld the flux of things, calm and apart, supported all that is. His spirit's stillness helped the toiling world. And this kind of stillness that Ashwapati had, helped the toiling world, a wonderful autobiographical reference to Sri Aurobindo himself. His spirit's stillness helped the toiling world, inspired by silence and the closed eye's sight. His force could work with a new luminous art on the crude material form which all is made, and the refusal of inertia's mass, and the grey front of the world's ignorance, and nascent matter, and the huge error of life. As a sculptor chisels a deity out of stone, he slowly chipped off the dark envelope, line of defense of nature's ignorance, the illusion and mystery of the inconscient, in whose black pall the eternal wraps his head, that he may act unknown in cosmic time. A splendor of self-creation from the peaks, a transfiguration in the mystic depths, a happier cosmic working could begin, and fashion the world's shape in him anew. God found in nature, nature fulfilled in God. Already in him was seen that task of power. Life made its home on the high tops of self. His soul, mind, heart became a single sun. Only life's lower reaches remained dim. Very important, this experience of his soul, mind, heart became a single sun. Only life's lower reaches remain dim, the subconscious, the inconscient, so on. But there too, in the uncertain shadow of life, there was a labor and a fiery breath. The ambiguous cowled, celestial puissance worked, watched by the inner witness's moveless peace. Even on the struggling nature left below, strong periods of illumination came. Lightnings of glory after glory burned. Experience was a tale of blaze and fire. Air rippled round the argosies of the gods. Strange riches sailed to him from the unseen. Splendors of insight filled the blank of thought. Knowledge spoke to the inconscient stillnesses. Rivers poured down of bliss and luminous force. Visits of beauty, storm sweeps of delight, rained from the all-powerful mystery above. Then stooped the eagles of omniscience. So you can see what kind of state Sri Aurobindo had experienced, that he could write like this for Ashwapati. A dense veil was rent, a mighty whisper heard, repeated in the privacy of his soul, a wisdom cry from rapt transcendences, sang on the mountains of an unseen world. The voices that an inner listening hears conveyed to him their prophet utterances, and flame-wrapped outbursts of the immortal word, and flashes of an occult revealing light approached him from the unreachable secrecy. So when these eagles of omniscience stooped down and Ashwapati became and had that experience of the omnipotent, omniscient, then this is the experience that is described here. An inspired knowledge sat enthroned within, whose seconds illumined more than reason's years. An ictus of revealing lustre fell, as if a pointing accent upon truth, and like a sky flare showing all the ground, a swift intuitive discernment shone. One glance could separate the true and false, or raise its rapid torch fire in the dark, to check the claimants crowding through mind's gates, covered by the forged signatures of the gods, detect the magic bride in her disguise, or scan the apparent face of thought and life. Oft inspiration with her lightning feet A sudden messenger from the all-seeing tops traversed the soundless corridors of his mind, bringing her rhythmic sense of hidden things. A music spoke, transcending mortal speech, as if from a golden vial of the all bliss, a joy of light, a joy of sudden sight, a rapture of the thrilled, undying word, poured into his heart as into an empty cup, a repetitions of God's first delight, creating in a young and virgin time. In a brief moment caught, a little space, all knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts, lodged in the expectant stillness of his depths, a crystal of the ultimate absolute, a portion of the inexpressible truth, revealed by silence to the silent soul. The intense creatrix in his stillness wrought, her power fallen speechless grew more intimate. She looked upon the seen and the unforeseen. Unguessed domain she made her native field. All vision gathered into a single ray, as when the eyes stare at an invisible point, till through the intensity of one luminous spot, an apocalypse of a world of images enters into the kingdom of the seer. A great nude arm of splendor suddenly rose. It rent the gauze opaque of nescience. Her lifted fingers' keen unthinkable tip bared with a stab of flame the closed beloved. An eye awake in voiceless heights of trance, a mind plucking at the unimaginable, overleaping with a soul in perilous bound, the high black wall hiding superconscience. She broke in with inspired speech for scythe, and plundered the unknowable's vast estate, a gleaner of infinitesimal grains of truth, a sheaf-binder of infinite experience. She pierced the guarded mysteries of world force, and her magic methods wrapped in 1,000 veils, or she gathered the lost secrets dropped by time, till the dust and crannies of his mounting root, mid all forsaken dreams of hastening mind, and buried remnants of forgotten space. A traveller between summit and abyss, she joined the distant ends, the viewless deeps, or streaked along the roads of heaven and hell, pursuing all knowledge like a questing hound. A reporter and a scribe of hidden wisdom talk, her shining minutes of celestial speech passed through the masked office of the occult mind, transmitting gave to prophet and to seer the inspired body of the mystic truth. A recorder of the inquiry of the gods, spokesman of the silent seeings of the Supreme, she brought immortal words to mortal men, above the reason's brilliant slender curve, released like radiant air dimming a moon, broad spaces of a vision without line, or limit swum into his spirit's ken. Oceans of being met his voyaging soul, calling to infinite discovery. Timeless domains of joy and absolute power, stretched out surrounded by the eternal hush. The ways that lead to endless happiness ran like dream smiles through meditating vasts. Disclosed stood up in a gold moment's blaze, white sun steps in the pathless infinite. Along a naked curve in bournless self, that points that run through the closed heart of things, shadowed the indeterminable line that carries the everlasting through the years. The magician order of the cosmic mind, coercing the freedom of infinity with a stark array of nature's symbol facts and life's incessant signals of event, transmuted chance and recurrence into laws, a chaos of signs into a universe. Out of the rich wonders and the intricate worlds of the spirit's dance with matter as its mask, the balance of the world's design grew clear, its symmetry of self-arranged effects, managed in the deep perspectives of the soul, and the realism of its elusive art, its logic of infinite intelligence, its magic of a changing eternity. A glimpse was caught of things forever unknown. The letter stood out of the unmoving word. In the immutable, nameless origin was seen emerging as from fathomless seas the trail of the ideas that made the world, and sown in the black earth of nature's trance, the seed of the spirit's blind and huge desire, from which the tree of cosmos was conceived, and spread its magic arms through a dream of space, and so on. So this is all the experiences that Ashwapati is having after he becomes omniscient, after his mind, heart, body and soul become one, and after he reaches a point where he is almost godlike, you could say. And then, it talks about inspiration coming into his mind and the knowledge that he gets just by looking at things and so on and so forth, and how he sees the whole world unfolding. And in fact, the secrets of knowledge, the secrets of the world and the universe are all disclosed to him. And spread its magic arms through a dream of space. Immense realities took on a shape. There looked out from the shadow of the unknown, the bodiless namelessness that saw God born, and tries to gain from the mortal's mind and soul a deathless body and a divine name. The immobile lips, the great surreal wings, the visage masked by superconscious sleep, the eyes with their closed lids that see all things, appeared of the architect who builds in trance. It's beautiful poetry, and look at the symbols, the way he's expressed what Ashwapati is seeing in the world he's in. As you know, this is Ashwapati's experiences in the yoga of the soul's release, when he goes to those planes. So, the eyes with their closed lids that see all things appeared of the architect who builds in trance. The original desire, born in the void, peered out. He saw the hope that never sleeps, the feet that run behind a fleeting fate, the ineffable meaning of the endless dream. So obviously he was at a point where creation itself, he saw the origin of creation, of where creation comes from. The supreme divine that sleeps, he is a supreme architect of the worlds. And he had that experience of going to that plane of consciousness from which, all of this manifested world comes from. The original desire, born in the void, peered out. So please note the word D with a capital D. He saw the hope that never sleeps, the feet that run behind a fleeting fate, the ineffable meaning of the endless dream. Hardly for a moment glimpsed, viewless to mind, as if a torch held by a power of God, the radiant world of the everlasting truth glimmered like a faint star bordering the night, above the golden's overmind's shimmering ridge. So then he saw this world that was above the overmind's shimmering ridge, this world, the radiant world of the everlasting truth, glimmered like a faint star bordering the night above the golden overmind's shimmering edge. Even were caught, as through a cunning veil, the smile of love that sanctions the long game, the calm indulgence and maternal breasts of wisdom suckling the child laughter of chance. Silence, the nurse of the Almighty's power, the omniscient hush, womb of the immortal word, and of the timeless, the still brooding face and the creative eye of eternity. So in this world, which he sees, which is above the golden overmind, obviously it is the supramental and superconscient worlds, that there he sees wisdom suckling the child laughter of chance, and silence the nurse of the Almighty's power, the omniscient hush, womb of the immortal word, the hush from which the first word, Shabda, comes from. So Silence, the nurse of the Almighty's power, the omniscient hush, womb of the immortal word, and of the timeless, the still brooding face, and the creative eye of eternity. Unbelievable poetry, and just something, the kind of experience it evokes while reading it is indescribable. The inspiring goddess entered a mortal's breast, made there her study of divining thought. So the inspiring goddess entered a mortal's breast. This is, of course, a reference to the goddess entering Ashwapati's breast. The inspiring goddess entered a mortal's breast, made there her study of divining thought and sanctuary of prophetic speech, and sat upon the tripod seat of mind, the triple seat of mind. So, and sat upon the tripod seat of mind, all was made above, all lit below. And in this place, you see already Ashwapati's mind, heart and soul had become one single sun. Now even his lower reaches, inconscient, the subconscious, the lower nature, became lit when the inspiring goddess entered into his mind, the triple tripod of his mind, and entered into his entire consciousness and lit it up. So this is the next level of experience. So the smile of love that sanctions the long game. The inspiring goddess, you can get a hint of it. It's a supramental power and Shakti and goddess of love. So, and sanctuary of prophetic speech, and sat upon the tripod seat of mind. What is the tripod seat of mind? What is it referring to, tripod? The tripod, the three levels of the mind, or you can say mental, vital, mental, physical, and the mind proper. The tripod seat of mind, the triple seat of the mind itself. Unless it means, so what are the three pillars? That is what it is, of the mind that a goddess has entered into. So it's mental, vital and physical mind. So, and sat upon the tripod seat of mind, all was made wide above, all lit below. In darkness's core, she dug out wells of light. So there it is, supermental consciousness that is emerging out of the inconscient. In darkness's core, she dug out wells of light. On the undiscovered depths, imposed a form, lent a vibrant cry to the unuttered vasts, and through great, shoreless, voiceless, starless breadths, bore earthward fragments of revealing thoughts, hewn from the silence of the ineffable. So when this goddess entered into Ashwapati, the consciousness of this goddess, obviously it was her supreme consciousness that entered him. This is what it did to him. So a voice in the heart uttered the unspoken name. A voice with a capital V. Obviously it's the same descent of the divine mother, the divine goddess, that is the voice from the heart. A voice in the heart uttered the unspoken name. A dream of seeking thought, wandering through space, entered the invisible and forbidden house. The treasure was found of a supernal day. In the deep subconscient glowed her jewel lamp. Whose jewel lamp? The power of the supreme divine Shakti. In the deep subconscient glowed her jewel lamp. Lifted, it showed the riches of the cave. So in the deep subconscient, her jewel lamp. So obviously this is a reference to Ashwapati discovering the superconscient, the supramental consciousness in the depths of darkness and inconscient. So in the deep subconscient glowed her jewel lamp. Lifted, it showed the riches of the cave, where by the miser traffickers of sense, unused, guarded beneath night's dragon paws, in folds of velvet darkness, draped they sleep, whose priceless value could have saved the world. So is the lamp of the superconscious that is hidden in matter, and which Ashwapati discovers and then realizes that it is this power that from matter can rise and and can save the world, and can bring the priceless treasures in folds of velvet darkness drape they sleep, whose priceless value could have saved the world. So obviously there is this power that is hidden in the cave of the subconscious, which is a supramental power that is there, which could have saved the world. That's the only power that can save the world. No other power can save the world. The mental power cannot save the world. We are all mental beings, and none of us have been able to save the world so far. And neither can the vital power and neither can the physical power save the world. So what is this power that is lying? It lifted, it showed what? So when this lamp was lifted in the subconscious, in the deep subconscious glowed her jewel lamp, lifted it showed the riches of the cave, where by the miser traffickers of sense. Who are the miser traffickers of sense? The senses, yeah. Where the senses, unused, guarded beneath night's dragon paws. There is a dragon, they say there's a dragon in the subconscious is often picturized or symbolized as the dragon. So guarded beneath night's dragon paws, in folds of velvet darkness, draped they sleep. In velvet darkness they sleep, whose priceless value could have saved the world. A darkness carrying morning in its breast, looked for the eternal wide returning gleam, waiting the advent of a larger ray and rescue of the lost herds of the sun. This is a very mystic imagery. In almost Vedic terms, he is describing the lost herds of the sun. This is a phrase in the Vedas and of course in the Upanishads, which is a reference to that knowledge, that lost, that superconscious, supramental light that is lost. So if there's a photograph, if you notice, that it can best describe this. When you enter into the dining room in the ashram in Pondicherry, right in front you see a painting where there's somebody lying in a cave, and the mother had asked Pritidi to paint that, and she had actually described that. She had actually drawn it for her, sketched it and explained from Savitri where it came. And she said, this is the supramental being and consciousness that is lying in matter in the depths of the cave of the subconscious world. And it is this, when he wakes, and this light that is radiating, even though unknown to everybody, that is going to bring both from the above and from below together. It has to come from both. It can't only be from above. Something has to be below in matter that is also superconscious. Otherwise, the consciousness in matter cannot awake. So this is a reference to this, and this is the best way to understand it by looking at that painting. So, a darkness carrying morning in its breast. So this darkness which is there is carrying morning in its breast, in its heart. Looked for the eternal wide returning gleam, waiting the advent of a larger ray and rescue of the lost herds of the sun. In a splendid extravagance of the waste of God, dropped carelessly in creation's spendthrift work, left in the chantiers of the bottomless world, and stolen by the robbers of the deep, the golden shekels of the eternal lie. What is the golden shekels here reference to? Of the eternal, what does shekels mean? SH shekels. Shek. Just anyone can check on the dictionary. The golden shekels, yeah, it could be. Could be something like that, yeah. Because again, it's a symbol of the wealth, spiritual wealth that is lying in these deep in the night of the earth, deep in the night of the subconscious. The spiritual wealth is lying, which is robbed by these dasyus, the robbers of the deep. The wonderful image of the spiritual wealth that is robbed by those. So, yeah. The golden shekels of the eternal lie, yeah. So eternal is a divine being lying there. They're just placed there, in the deep, in the ignorance. Not lie in terms of lying. No. So, no. The golden shekels of them, they are real gold, huh? The golden shekels, Israel, huh? Oh, the golden shekels of the eternal lie. So here almost a kind of a reference to, I don't know why you use the word shekels here. But could be some sort of maybe in those days gold was measured like that. Okay. So, the golden shekels of the eternal lie, hoarded from touch and view and thought's desire, locked in blind onters of the ignorant flood, lest men should find them and be even as gods. So this is lest men should find them. So this knowledge, this wisdom, this power that is locked in the world, in the subconscious terrains of the subterranean world, is such that even people who are not ready for this power should not find it, because if they did, they would become Asuric titans and use it for their selfish self-interest and their egoistic desire rather than for the world's evolution. So, of course, there are so many stories in the Puranas and in the Vedas, and this is a very, very Vedic passage that, he is taking his symbology from. But of course, Sri Aurobindo has had this experience which he is narrating through the words, through the mouth of Ashwapati. So, in a splendid extravagance of the waste of God, dropped carelessly now you see, never in English language has this ever been written. In iambic pentameter, this is a proper poetic rhythm and kind of meter that Sri Aurobindo is using. Like in the Vedas, if you see the Vedic meter, there is a chant, there is a certain rhythm. In the same way, this is the first time in the English language that anyone has attempted it. I mean, even the Nobel Prize would be too small to offer to someone like him. And in fact, somebody put his name for a Nobel Prize and he refused. Yeah, of course. And Sri Aurobindo said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not interested, you can keep it. So, for Savitri, at those days, and someone, because I think the Nobel Prize has to be given to somebody when he's alive and not after he passes away. So, I think it was a 47 or something like that, or 48. Somebody had proposed it. So, but that doesn't matter. The main thing is, look at the language, look at the imagery, look at the way he's mastered meter in the most Vedic sense of the word in English language. What he's done to the English language for centuries. We are like infants. This Savitri has not been as yet discovered by the world. When it becomes more in the consciousness of the world, it will change everything. And people really don't know what a treasure is sitting here. We're sitting here happily reading it, but you have no idea what you're reading and what this is. The light that emanates from Savitri, something unfathomable. That's why any time, Mother said, any time spent in the atmosphere of Savitri, reading Savitri, is a time not wasted. It will grow your soul. She said it will change your life. And that is why she said she wrote so much about Savitri. So here we go here again. The golden shekels of the eternal lie, hoarded from touch and view and thought's desire, locked in blind entres of the ignorant flood, lest men should find them and be even as gods. So sense, again a reference to the Amritam, the immortal rasa. You talk about this, the nectar, the Amrit, the Manthan. If found, can turn human beings immortal. So these are all Vedic images, and also images of the, to explain something that is not explainable in normal language. The beautiful symbology that he's used about, the night and the inconscient and the subconscious, and how this immortal knowledge, this immortal power, this immortal light is deeply hidden in night, which with the robbers of the night try and take away. The robbers of the night are obviously those who are self-seekers for their own self-aggrandizement, but actually is lying there, and if men could find it, they would become immortal. So all this, the goddess that has come into Savitri and has entered into his being and has opened up his subconscious and his inconscient, is showing that deep inside him this supramental, immortal knowledge and wealth, the spiritual wealth lies. So this is the symbology that is being done. Again, this is a spiritual experience. That's why in the Vedas it's written in this kind of formation of symbols, so that the ordinary person cannot understand it, but it's not to be taken literally. These are descriptions of spiritual experiences. A vision lightened on the viewless heights, a wisdom illumined from the voiceless depths, a deeper interpretation, greatened truth, a grand reversal of the night and day. A grand reversal of the night and day. All the world's values changed, heightening life's aim. A wiser word, a larger thought came in than what the slow labor of human mind can bring. A secret sense awoke that could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. So the secret sense awoke that could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. The universe was not now this senseless world, borne round inert on an immense machine. It cast away its grandiose lifeless front, a mechanism no more or work of chance, but a living movement of the body of God. And this is what Ashwapati discovers, that the universe is not a mechanic chance. It's not something that we all say, is the world an illusion? Why was the world created? What is the world? Is it just ruled by chance and destiny, or is it something else? So Ashwapati here has the vision of the world, the entire world, as the body of God. Can you imagine? So he sees and experiences what we have seen in the Gita is the Vishwarupa. So the Vishwarupa, he experiences the world as the body of the divine. The entire world. So listen to these words, a deeper interpretation. So here when he goes into this experience of when the subconscious opens up and he sees the superconscious embedded in the subconscious matter of the world, then he sees a vision lightened on the viewless heights, a wisdom illumined from the voiceless depths, a deeper interpretation greatened truth, a grand reversal of the night and day. So grand reversal of the night and day, you try and understand from the superconscious being in the subconscious. Night itself was the day, because he saw in the night the divine, the illumination of the day. In night was embedded the superconscious. So that's why a grand reversal of the night and day. All the world's values changed, heightening life's aim. A wiser word, a larger thought came in than what the slow labor of human mind can bring. A secret sense awoke that could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. How the illumination is happening in Ashwapati. A secret sense awoke that could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. The universe was not now this senseless whirl, borne round inert on an immense machine. So the universe no longer was a mechanical sort of unit or, experience for Ashwapati. The universe was not something that was bound to set laws of karma and fate and a cause and effect. But instead, what did he see? The universe was not now this senseless whirl borne round inert on an immense machine. It cast away its grandiose lifeless front, a mechanism no more, or work of chance. So this idea that there's only chance and fate was no longer there, but a living movement. Instead, what did Ashwapati experience the whole universe as? A living movement of the body of God. So the entire universe he saw as a living movement of the body of God. A spirit hid in forces and in forms. So a spirit hid in forces and in forms was the spectator of the mobile scene. So this spirit that was hiding in forces and in forms was actually the spectator of the mobile scene. The beauty and the ceaseless miracle let in a glow of the unmanifest. The formless everlasting moved in it, seeking its own perfect forms and souls and things. Life kept no more a dull and meaningless shape. In the struggle and upheaval of the world, he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth. A secret knowledge masked as ignorance. So what did he see? Instead, life kept no more a dull and meaningless shape. In the struggle and upheaval of the world, he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth. A secret knowledge masked as ignorance. So the secret knowledge is what is being described here in the last page we read through the Vedic symbols, and is the secret knowledge that immortality, the same secret knowledge that is referred to in the Vedas. So he saw this. He saw the labor of a Godhead's birth. He saw this. He felt the secret knowledge masked as ignorance. He experienced all this and saw it. Fate covered with an unseen necessity. Game of chance of an omnipotent will. Not just a game of chance, but a game of chance of an omnipotent will. A glory and a rapture and a charm. So the all blissful sat unknown within the heart. Earth's pains were the ransom of its prisoned delights. So what does this mean? Earth's pains were the ransom of its prisoned delights? Ransom that you pay for experiencing or to get this, to open up this prison delight. So you look for something that is eternal, because anything, so you're happy where you are. So you don't look for this prison delight, which is the secret knowledge, and which is the all a glory and a rapture, the all blissful sat unknown. within the heart of the universe, you understand? Earth's pains were the ransom of its present delight. A glad communion tinged the passing hours. The days were travellers on a destined road, the nights companions of his musing spirit. A heavenly impetus quickened all his breast. The trudge of time changed to a splendid march. The divine dwarf towered to unconquered worlds. So what is this divine dwarf, which we spoke about last time also? Towered to unconquered worlds. He walks through the entire earth. So this must be a reference to something, some mythological figure. Yeah. And then he went through the three worlds. So this is the reference. See how Sri Aurobindo in English language is referring to so much of mythology and Vedas and so many things. It's unbelievable. So it's not so simple to read Savitri. You can write theses on one page. Daksh, is it? A heavenly impetus quickened all his breast. The trudge of time changed to a splendid march. The divine dwarf towered to unconquered worlds. Earth grew too narrow for his victory. Once only registering the heavy tread of a blind power on human littleness, life now became a sure approach to God. Existence, a divine experiment, and cosmos, the soul's opportunity. Godhead's birth. Yeah, he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth, a secret knowledge masked as ignorance. I don't know whether it's a psychic or not. No, here it's on the much higher scale. It's on the universal scale. So psychic is an individual phenomena. No, it's talking about the all blissful. But Sri Aurobindo revised Savitri after the mother came many times. So he's revising Savitri in 1948, 1949. So mother had already come by then. So he had included those. I don't know which chapter. Now that you have to see. हाँ तो वो देखना पड़ेगा. हाँ. But anyway, here it's something else. We're talking about the universe. So that's why I keep reading this. The all blissful sat unknown within the heart. Within the heart of the universe, not within the heart of the individual. But you could take it, could refer to both. There's nothing that will stop you from seeing that. So earth's pains were the ransom. That's why the next line, earth's pains were the ransom of its present delight. A glad communion tinged the passing hours. The days were travellers on a destined road, the nights companions of his musing spirit. A heavenly impetus quickened all his breast. The trudge of time changed to a splendid march. The divine dwarf towered to unconquered worlds. Earth grew too narrow for his victory. Once only registering the heavy tread of a blind power on human littleness, life now became a sure approach to God, existence a divine experiment, and cosmos the soul's opportunity. The world was a conception and a birth of spirit and matter into living forms. So what was the world? He saw the world as a conception and a birth of spirit in matter into living forms. And nature bore the immortal in her womb, that she might climb through him to eternal life. His being lay down in bright immobile peace. Now, his being here is obviously reference to Ashwapati. His being lay down in bright immobile peace and bathed in wells of spiritual light. So you can see the experience he had. He bathed in wells of spiritual light. It wandered in wide fields of wisdom self, lit by the rays of an everlasting sun. This everlasting sun is, of course, the supermind. It wandered in wide fields of wisdom self, lit by the rays of an everlasting sun. Even his body's subtle self within could raise the earthly parts towards higher things, and feel on it the breath of heavenlier air. Already it journeyed towards divinity, upbuoyed upon winged winds of rapid joy, upheld to a light it could not always hold. It left mind's distance from the truth supreme and lost life's incapacity for bliss. So firstly it left mind's distance from the truth supreme. So this mind's distance from the truth supreme is the ignorance that covers mind was removed. Mind was no longer distant from the highest truth, the truth supreme. And also in Ashwapati's entire life, his whole being lost the life's incapacity for bliss. He became capable of experiencing complete bliss, full bliss. So lost in capacity. Wonderful way of writing it. All now suppressed in us began to emerge. All now, suddenly from the personal he goes into the collective, general. All now suppressed in us began to emerge. Now what does this last line mean? All now suppressed in us began to emerge. So there was a point in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, in the ashram life, where Sri Aurobindo said, now I've opened the subconscious. I've entered into the subconscious. I've gone deep into it. I have opened it to the light. So that's why all now suppressed in us. This was the collective yoga he's talking about, of humanity and especially of those. So all now suppressed in us began to emerge. So you'll see this one line suddenly coming somewhere in Savitri, where you will suddenly see, it's out of, it seems, general. But if you look at the history of it, this is why he's suddenly going into a collective statement like this. Thus came his soul's release, and thus came. So, of course, this is a king and the yoga of the soul's release. This is a description of Ashwapati's yoga and the yoga of the soul's release. Thus came his soul's release from ignorance. So then he got what is the soul's release from ignorance? What is the word in Sanskrit or in Hindi? What do you get? You become a Jivan Mukta, you become self-realized, attain self-realization. What is it? Soul's release from ignorance is what? Not moksha. Moksha, yeah, even moksha in a way. You are free, totally free. Moksha in the sense of free, yes. So complete. It's a realization. It's thus came his soul's release from ignorance. Only one line only will explain everything. One line itself, you can write a long thesis on. It contains all of spiritual experience in it, every experience in it. So, thus came his soul's release from ignorance. His mind and body's first spiritual change. So what is the first spiritual change in the ladder of spiritual is, first is self-realization, which psychization is before. Those are the steps. In the triple transformation, it's psychization, spiritualization and whatever, but in the traditional yoga, it's self-realization. So if you are going through the traditional part where Sri Aurobindo says, my yoga starts where other yogas end. Only after self-realization, you can start doing Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Until you have not self-realized, until you have not completely like this, all ignorance is completely not left you, the ego has not completely disappeared, you cannot start his yoga. Of course, you can prepare for his yoga, but you cannot begin his yoga. So, thus came his soul's release from ignorance, his mind and body's first spiritual change. A wide God knowledge poured down from above, a new world knowledge broadened from within. So, there is a word, I'm trying to find it. It's called, so when your entire consciousness becomes universalized, what is that called? There is a word for it. Not nirvana. You become one with the cosmic. See, Sri Aurobindo's yoga is very world-centered. When you become one with the world, that means you see the entire world as an expression and as the body of the divine. There's a stage in yoga that it's called the cosmic consciousness, cosmic realization. There's a word, I'm not able to find it. So thus came his soul's release from ignorance, his mind and body's first spiritual change, a wide God knowledge poured down from above, a new world knowledge broadened from within. His daily thoughts looked up to the true and one, his commonest doings welled from an inner light. It doesn't matter, this is what the experience is of realization of the first step. This is only the first realization of self. When you are self-realized and when you have realized the cosmic consciousness in you, this is what happens. Awakened to the lines that nature hides, attuned to her movements that exceed our ken, he grew one with a covert universe. He grew one with a covert universe. What is covert universe? Hidden, yeah. So this is I'm trying to say this universal consciousness, the state in Siddhi. So that is what he is experienced and he has realized. Total universal consciousness. Total universalization of his consciousness. So he grew one with a covert universe, hidden universe. His grasp surprised her mightiest energy springs. He spoke with the unknown guardians of the worlds. So he spoke with the unknown guardians. What is this guardians they're referring to here? The unknown guardians, capital G, of the worlds. Who are the unknown guardians of the world? I think it's Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. I don't know who they are, but something like that. But they are unknown. Yeah. Anyway, he spoke to the unknown guardians of the worlds. Forms he decried our mortal eyes. He saw forms that cannot be seen by us. His wide eyes bodied viewless entities. So his eyes saw viewless, what we cannot see, viewless entities. He saw the cosmic forces at their work and felt the occult impulse behind man's will. Time's secrets were to him an oft-read book. Time's secrets were to him nothing but an often-read book. He could easily go and see and decipher time's secrets. Time's secrets were an oft-read book. The records of the future and the past outlined their excerpts on the etheric page. The records, so here you have Trikala Drishti and the records, and that, what is that Brahma Lipi? In the Akashic worlds, you can see the records of the future and the records of the past. Everything known and unknown is visible. You have heard of those, no? The Lipis. So, the records of the future and the past outline their excerpts on the etheric page. This is a very, very important reference to the record of yoga. If any of you have read it, you will see that Sri Aurobindo has done many experiments and he has been reading. He sits there and in the sky, there's a lipi, there's a whole etheric thing. The whole knowledge of the past and the future is revealed to him. And he's noting those down and various things. So this is a reference to his record of yoga where you will see all of this in pages and pages, books and books, in detail described. Here it's described in one line. That's the difference. So, Time's secrets were to him an oft-read book. The records of the future and the past outlined their excerpts on the etheric page. Etheric page is the sky. One and harmonious by the Maker's skill, the human in him paced with the divine. Very, very important. The human in him paced with the divine. His acts betrayed not the interior flame. This forged the greatness of his front to earth. A genius heightened in his body's cells, that knew the meaning of his fate hedged the works, akin to the march of unaccomplished powers beyond life's arc in spirit's immensities. Apart he lived in his mind's solitude. So you know how Sri Aurobindo was in solitude for years and years and years. Not just the Alipur jail, but even in Pondicherry. Went into deep solitude. It's completely autobiographical. If you read the record of yoga, you'll understand what he's meaning. Every line is one book or two books. So it's amazing what he's packed into this and how difficult it is for us to understand it unless we've read the body of his work. Anyway, the human in him paced with the divine. You know that Sri Aurobindo used to walk 8 hours every day, every single day throughout his stay in Pondicherry, to such an extent that the footprints where his feet were walking went into the cement floor. Those footprints were visible for anyone to see because he constantly walking day after day, year after year. So the human in him paced with the divine, and he did his entire sadhana not through sitting in the tamasic pose, but he did it through walking. His entire sadhana was done through quiet, because he said the walk helped to dynamize, keep the tamas out, and it allowed his being to receive huge pressures of massive descents of force that would have otherwise crushed any other human body. So, again, why I'm saying this is because one line is written to express his entire sadhana of 30 years. He's human. Of course, he did that in the early part when he first went to Pondicherry, and up to the year, I think, 1926, or after he got the over-mental realization, the Krishna consciousness, when Sri Krishna descended into his physical being. Till that time, he was doing the sadhana of walking. So you can see even now, a little bit, in that room earlier, some fool went and put cement over it, I know, but we know where he went exactly. Yeah, you can still see it, by the way. I saw it. Not the whole thing. I think something, the marks are still there. They cemented it, but there's something that you can make out. No? Maybe it was so vivid that I can see his footstep. Yeah, well, since 1998 we've been seeing it. Okay, but anyway, they describe it so vividly once you go there that he walked from here and he walked from there. Maybe you can imagine it. So, but anyway, this is an interesting line. That's why if you don't know, you'll happily gloss over it. You won't understand what he means. The human paced with the divine. Now you understand what it means. Because that was when he was divinizing his consciousness. So his human and his divine were both there, paced with the divine. And that's how he did it. So that knew the meaning of his fate-hedged works, akin to the march of unaccomplished powers, beyond life's arc and spirit's immensities, apart he lived in his mind's solitude, a demigod, shaping the lives of men. Outwardly, he did not show people who he really was and how he had completely changed. So, one soul's ambition lifted up the race. So, it was Ashwapati's yoga. It was Ashwapati's aspiration and tapasya that lifted up the race, because through his tapasya came the descent of the new consciousness that had transformed the earth. So it's listening also. One soul's ambition lifted up the race. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. A power worked, but none knew where it came from. The universal strengths were linked with his, filling earth's smallness with their boundless breadths. He drew the energies that transmute an age. So you just see the power that he gained. He drew the energies that transmute an age, a whole age, immeasurable by the common look. He made great dreams, a mold for coming things, and cast his deeds like bronze to front the years. His walk through time outstripped the human stride, lonely his days, and splendid like the sun's. End of Canto 3. So this is a wonderful description, biographical account of Sri Aurobindo's yoga that he expresses through the persona of Ashwapati.